Hello and welcome to this video. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoy this video. Today we're going to be talking and learning about the 4 states of consciousness. Now, the goal of the Gnostic student is to awaken our consciousness. And in order for us to awaken our consciousness, we first and foremost must understand the 4 states of consciousness that exist. So at any given moment, we can self-evaluate and see maybe perhaps where we fall at that moment, where our state of consciousness is at any given time in our life. So before we talk about the 4 particular states of consciousness that exist, let's talk about consciousness. So consciousness itself is an energy of very high frequency. Consciousness is the light that the subconscious does not perceive. So consciousness is, in other words, direct truth. Beyond all opinion, beyond all belief, it is simply what is. And we as humans have a certain level of consciousness that lives within us. Now, our job on our path to self-knowledge is to awaken this consciousness, to revolutionize this consciousness within us, to activate this consciousness. So that way we can have particular experiences that will show us our particular truths, which that is what we're most interested in. So to begin with, the very first state of consciousness is called acacia. Now, acacia is the lowest state of consciousness. It is where we could say our consciousness is completely asleep or inactive. So in the state of acacia, we find violence, we find crimes, we find barbaric realities that are incoherent, that are, in other words, the manifestation of our ego or our psychological aggregates at full. This is the world that sometimes we see reflected in our dreams when we dream at night, when we have these wild, strange, violent, barbaric dreams that don't quite seem to make any sense. Many times it's that first acacia level of consciousness manifesting itself in our dream world. Now, the second level of consciousness is pistis. Pistis is a level of consciousness that most of humanity lives in. So it is the level of consciousness where beliefs exist, where we simply follow what we see. We do not ask any questions. We do not try to understand better what we see in front of us. For example, we do not try to understand the morality of one thing in one place versus the amorality of that same thing in another place. We simply just follow and repeat. So like I said, this is the state that most of us as humanity live in from day in and day out. We're born in a society. We strive to fit the standards of that society without ever really asking ourselves if this is what we want, if this is what we believe in, and if this is what we hope to gain out of our life. So as we continue to study the Gnostic doctrine and do the different spiritual practices, we begin to activate our consciousness. Now, as we awaken our consciousness, as we activate our consciousness within inside of ourselves, we enter into the third state of consciousness, which is called dianoia, or the state of self-conscience or self-awareness. Now, in this state, we begin to question our beliefs, begin to question the concepts that we have in our head and the reality that we see externally, with the goal of experimenting for ourselves a more direct truth. So at this point, we are aware that we have our essence, that we have the psychological aggregates that live within us that manifest themselves as more commonly known as the ego, and we are in a state of self-observation, or trying to become aware of the reality that truly exists internally and then in turn externally. So the state of dianoia is where we strive to maintain ourselves, is in this state of self-awareness where we are constantly asking ourselves, where am I? What am I doing? who am I with? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And we try to become aware of our actions. And we try to become aware through experimentation of what we believe and why we believe it. So once we are able to gravitate in this state of self-awareness, moment to moment, we then, after much, much, much spiritual work, pass to the fourth state of consciousness, which is Gnosis. Now here it is definitely worth saying that very few human souls have actually ever incarnated the fourth level of consciousness, which is Gnosis. And that is the complete objective consciousness, which means that we are beyond beliefs, we are beyond doubts, we are beyond experimentation, but rather we are living in the light of our consciousness, which means we have a full awareness about ourselves and about the world we live in and about the universe in which we are a part of. So the great masters of humanity that have done lifetimes of spiritual work and have had super disciplines, spiritually speaking, have managed to penetrate into the fourth aspect of consciousness, or the fourth state of consciousness, which is Gnosis. So now, how do we evolve from one level to the next, to the next, and to the next? So, as I mentioned before, the goal of the Gnostic student is to awaken our consciousness, which means we must understand why our consciousness is asleep, or why our consciousness continues to be asleep. So, although there are many topics about this, many classes to be taught, we are just going to speak upon a very simple aspect that occurs in all of us from moment to moment to moment to moment throughout our life. And that is the process of identification and fascination with the external world that surrounds us, or even for that matter with our own internal states and conditions that we find ourselves in. So for example, when we are out, let's say shopping, we're looking in the windows, we're seeing things we like. Something calls our attention and our brain immediately associates it with a memory, perhaps if it's a beautiful dress. We remember when we wore a dress just like that at our sister's wedding, and then at our sister's wedding, those friends were there and we did that and this is what happened. And then before we know it, we are not standing in front of the store window looking at the dress. We are at our sister's wedding years ago, reliving or dreaming all that was in that moment. So these things occur moment to moment with all the stimulus that we receive in our life that passes through in our daily life. Many times we identify what we see and what we like, and then we become fascinated with it. And in that process, it leads our consciousness to sleep, which means it is no longer active, it is no longer participating in our life in that moment. So the more we work on our self-observation and we avoid falling in that identification and fascination, then the greater our level of consciousness will become. And it's important to say that just because we reach the dianoic state of consciousness in one moment, it does not mean in another given moment we can forget ourselves, fall into the pistis state, and even at another moment forget ourselves even further and fall into the akashic state. So we hope you have enjoyed this topic. There is much to study about the levels of consciousness, but it is important every day, moment to moment, we are trying to become more aware of our thoughts, of our emotions, of our actions, of the forces within us that lead us to do what we do, to think what we think, and to feel what we feel. And as we do that, we will very naturally be incrementing and activating our consciousness. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.